Prepare yourself for a twisting tale of privilege and betrayal, where one man's fortune becomes a double-edged sword. Arthur Caldwell, a self-made millionaire, celebrated for his lavish parties and influential connections, harbored a secret that threatened to unravel his perfect life. When he gifted a sprawling, breathtaking mansion to his mistress, he had no idea that his pregnant wife had an explosive revelation of her own, a DNA test with devastating implications. Love lies and loyalty collide in this story that exposes the fragility lurking beneath gilded facades. Sit tight and prepare to be riveted by a chain of events that none could have predicted. Arthur Caldwell was born in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Richmond, Virginia. His father, Gerald Caldwell, had spent his life working double shifts at a local factory to keep food on the table, while his mother, Edith Caldwell, supplemented the meager family income by taking in laundry from neighbors. From an early age, Arthur embraced the mantra his parents impressed upon him that nothing came free in life and everything worthwhile demanded tireless effort and sacrifice. He grew up yearning for a world bigger than the cramped apartment where the smell of detergent lingered in the air. When he was 13, Arthur took on his first job, delivering newspapers at dawn before school. He would rise at 4:30 each morning, slip into his worn-out sneakers, and hop on his beat-up bicycle. The streets were often silent, save for the hum of streetlights flickering overhead. In those quiet hours, he imagined wealth and success, envisioning tall buildings with his name at the top, affluent circles he'd someday join, and a life far removed from the constant worry over rent. At 18, Arthur earned a scholarship to a local community college, majoring in business administration. Unlike many of his classmates, whose greatest concern was balancing their social lives, Arthur juggled 2 part-time jobs to support himself. During these years, he discovered a fierce determination within him. If he had to sleep 2 hours less than everyone else to get ahead, he would. If he had to skip meals to save money for textbooks, he did so without complaint. He met mentors who recognized his drive and sharpened his ambitions. One professor, Dr. Beatrice Monroe, taught him the complexities of financial markets, a lesson that would become the foundation of his future empire. During his final year of college, Arthur threw caution to the wind and invested his scant savings in the stock market. The first stock he bought soared unexpectedly within months, tripling his investment. Emboldened, he reinvested every dime he earned from side jobs into financial opportunities he researched thoroughly, often skipping nights out to pore over company balance sheets. By his early 20s, Arthur had grown his original investment tenfold, and colleagues began calling him a wonder kid with a Midas touch. An opportunity to network arose when Arthur was invited to a financial conference in Omaha. There, he shook hands with numerous industry giants, including none other than Warren Buffett, the legendary investor, famed for his philanthropic endeavors. Arthur recalled how Warren smiled kindly at him as he asked pointed questions about Arthur's own investment strategy. Though the conversation was brief, it was enough to spark unstoppable motivation. Arthur left that conference understanding that to reach the next level, he needed to be bold and seize bigger opportunities. He was done with playing small. A few years later, after a particularly lucrative venture in technology startups, Arthur founded Caldwell Capital, a boutique investment firm. He carefully nurtured it, hiring bright, hungry minds who shared his vision. Within a decade, Caldwell Capital managed millions, then billions of dollars. Arthur's name began appearing in financial magazines, and he was invited to speak at global events. Acquaintances marveled at his unassuming background, praising him for his unstoppable grit. Despite all the success, Arthur still carried the anxious tension of a man who'd grown up with nothing. He devoured every chance to expand his empire, constantly chasing the next deal. On the outside, he was a polished magnate, wearing impeccably tailored suits and gliding through high society galas as if born for them. On the inside, he struggled with the fear that he might lose it all if he ever relaxed. He developed an insatiable appetite for admiration, a craving that would lead him down a precarious path. Arthur's personal life was relatively quiet until he turned 35, when he first met Catherine, his future wife, at a charity dinner in New York. Catherine, a pediatrician specializing in cardiology, was the kind of woman who radiated kindness. She hadn't been impressed by Arthur's money or brand-new Jaguar parked outside. Instead, she admired his passion for philanthropic causes. Their courtship was swift, propelled by a deep mutual respect for each other's intelligence, ambition, and philanthropic inclinations. They married within a year. Yet beneath that fairy tale love story, Arthur continued to juggle a relentless schedule, traveling for weeks at a time, meeting prospective partners, and forging deals worldwide. Although he adored Catherine, his shining beacon of compassion, he found himself occasionally drawn to the glittering nightlife and the admiring glances of strangers. Little did he know that this duality in his nature, the constant hunger for more, was about to send his carefully constructed world into disarray. Catherine Caldwell was the epitome of grace under pressure. Born Catherine Lowe to a family of academic high achievers in Boston, she was expected to become a brilliant doctor from the day she announced at 7 that she wanted to heal people's hearts, both literally and metaphorically. She had a soft voice that masked an inner steel. Her patients adored her. Colleagues respected her diligence and tenderness with children. When Catherine met Arthur, she was on the cusp of completing her fellowship and didn't have time for elaborate dating rituals. But Arthur didn't mind. He flew to Boston just to have dinner with her in the hospital cafeteria. He sent her supportive texts during overnight shifts. He listened to her talk about the heartbreak of children with congenital heart defects and how healthcare inequities troubled her deeply. Arthur's empathy and, yes, his philanthropic generosity drew her to him. Their wedding was small and heartfelt, held in Catherine's parents' backyard, with only close friends and relatives in attendance. Instead of an extravagant honeymoon, the couple spent a week volunteering at a rural medical camp in Guatemala, merging their passions for service. For a while, it seemed like they had the perfect balance. Catherine grounded him, reminded him that the wealth he accumulated could do tremendous good in the world. Arthur gave her the support and resources to expand her philanthropic reach. But as Arthur's financial empire grew, so did the demands on his time. Caldwell Capital soon ballooned into a behemoth, and its founder spent increasing hours on private jets, forging deals across 3 continents. Catherine noticed her husband returning from trips with a certain aloofness, a new tension in his jaw. She chalked it up to stress. After all, that level of responsibility would strain anyone. She tried to be the supportive wife, often working overnight shifts at the hospital so she wouldn't distract him from critical business negotiations. Nevertheless, Catherine began seeing little signs that unsettled her. A new cologne she didn't recognize lingered on his suit jacket. Cryptic text messages lit up his phone late at night. Arthur, once so keen to share every thought with her, started clamming up about where his business trips took him. Catherine dismissed each suspicion as paranoia. She loved him and he loved her. Everyone said they were the ideal couple. Their arguments started small disputes over missed dinner dates or incomplete philanthropic responsibilities. Arthur promised Catherine that once he secured a certain venture in Hong Kong or sealed the deal with a biotech startup in Berlin, things would calm down. But each success only opened the door to a new, more lucrative prospect, and Arthur found himself incapable of refusing these fresh opportunities. Catherine's patience frayed at the edges. She was often left alone in their massive estate, ironically decorated to exude warmth and homeliness. Catherine wasn't naive. She understood that money brought temptation. She had grown up around affluent families, seeing how easily some men and women strayed under the weight of wealth, fame, and the perpetual excitement it offered. But somehow, she believed Arthur was different, grounded by his humble origins, his devotion to philanthropic causes, and his vow to her. Then, one day, Catherine learned she was pregnant. She was a doctor, well-versed in how the body feels when shifts occur, but she took 3 over-the-counter tests to confirm. Elation rushed through her. She immediately pictured a life filled with laughter, the pitter-patter of tiny feet, and the merging of her 2 great loves, family and healing. She couldn't wait to tell Arthur. She timed the announcement for his return from a trip to Europe, but as soon as he set foot in the house, she sensed an odd detachment in him. He spent the first hour talking on his phone, locked in his study, then emerged with a forced smile. When Catherine finally told him, Arthur's reaction was subdued. He assured her he was delighted, but Catherine caught a flicker of apprehension in his eyes that contradicted his words. That night, she confronted him with her suspicions, carefully asking if everything was okay, if maybe he felt unprepared for fatherhood. Arthur dodged her probing, attributing his behavior to jet lag and a tough negotiation in London. But Catherine's intuition told her there was more. The next morning, her phone buzzed with an unexpected message from a close friend, Evelyn Johnson, who was also part of the philanthropic circuit. The text read, "Need to talk about Arthur urgent." With a quick goodbye to Arthur, who was already heading out for another meeting, Catherine rushed to meet Evelyn for coffee. There, in hushed tones, Evelyn shared troubling rumors circulating the socialite circles. Arthur had been seen in the company of a stunning brunette at a private casino event in Monaco. Not a colleague, not a potential client, but apparently someone far more intimate. Catherine felt her stomach churn. She pressed Evelyn for details, but her friend could only relay second-hand gossip. No hard evidence. Yet the mere suggestion haunted Catherine for the rest of the day. That evening, Catherine confronted Arthur in tears. He'd just returned from his office, tension radiating from his posture. She demanded to know if there was someone else, if these rumors had any merit. Arthur, exasperated, denied everything. He insisted it was all baseless talk from jealous competitors. To quell her fears, he promised to reduce his travel schedule once a major deal closed. They ended the night in a strained embrace, with Catherine clinging to the hope that she was simply allowing rumor and her own loneliness to cloud her judgment. What Catherine didn't realize was that behind the polished veneer, there were cracks wide enough for secrets to slip through. And the biggest secret was already unraveling in the form of a certain woman who would soon rattle Catherine's world to its core. Linda Rivera was a name whispered in exclusive VIP lounges and 5-star hotel bars. Born in Barcelona, she had moved to the United States in her early 20s, determined to reinvent herself. She had a face that could hold conversations, piercing green eyes, high cheekbones, and an air of sultry confidence. While she lacked the generational wealth of the socialites she mingled with, she compensated with sharp wit, resourcefulness, and an uncanny ability to get what she wanted from powerful men. Linda worked as a consultant for a luxury event planning company in Miami, where she curated gala dinners, high-stakes poker nights, and lavish yacht parties. It was at one such event, an exclusive Monte Carlo-themed soiree held at a private estate in the Hamptons, where she first crossed paths with Arthur Caldwell. He was immediately drawn to her, not just for her beauty, but also the easy way she navigated high society without seeming overawed by it. Linda recognized his name from the financial pages, and her instincts told her he was someone who could open doors for her. That night, they fell into a playful banter over the planning details of the party. Arthur teased her about the extravagant decor, while Linda chided him for sneaking away from the high-roller blackjack table to discuss horticultural choices with her. They exchanged flirtatious smiles, each aware of the dangerous magnetism sparking between them. By the end of the event, Linda had Arthur's personal number, and they began texting under the guise of future collaborations. In the following weeks, Arthur, despite his vow to reassure Catherine of his loyalty, found himself pulled further into Linda's orbit. Her messages arrived at odd hours. Thinking of a winter-themed gala, your thoughts, or we should meet to finalize details for your upcoming fundraiser. These professional pretenses quickly morphed into midnight rendezvous at quiet lounges, secret dinner reservations at upscale restaurants under assumed names, and eventually passionate trysts in exclusive hotel suites. Arthur was enchanted by Linda's allure and her complete lack of moral hesitation in pursuing him. She never judged his business ambitions or demanded philanthropic commitments. Instead, she fed his ego. She reminded him that he had earned every bit of his success and deserved to enjoy the luxuries life offered. The guilt that occasionally pricked Arthur was drowned out by Linda's unwavering admiration. For Linda, Arthur was her golden ticket, if not to a happily ever after, then to a world of comfort she'd long craved. She had no illusions about love in their arrangement. She had learned early on that a woman in her position rarely secured lasting devotion from men like Arthur Caldwell. But she was determined to leverage his resources, status, and connections as far as she could, collecting opulent gifts, forging new alliances in his orbit, and elevating her social standing. Catherine remained unsuspecting of Linda's existence, though her anxiety grew daily. Arthur's business travels increased instead of decreasing, contrary to his promise. Whispered rumors about a mysterious woman in Monaco evolved into gossip about exclusive gatherings in New York and London. A few acquaintances even approached Catherine directly with their concerns, but she dismissed them, unwilling to believe in her husband's betrayal. All the while, Linda took bolder steps. She engineered situations where she could appear at the same industry events as Arthur. She began wearing a discreet necklace with a pendant shaped like a tiny gold coin. Arthur had gifted it to her as a playful nod to his finance roots. She posted cryptic social media photos, hinting at luxurious destinations, the corners of lavish hotel rooms, or glasses of the rarest champagne. Each post was carefully curated to taunt and intrigue. Eventually, Linda grew confident enough to ask Arthur for something bigger, something permanent, that would cement her status. She wanted real estate, a mansion to be exact. She had identified a sprawling property on the outskirts of Palm Beach, an architectural marvel with glistening marble floors, manicured gardens, and a private beach that led to turquoise waters. Arthur, intoxicated by her charm and anxious to keep her content, pulled strings to purchase the property. The transaction was hidden under the name of a shell corporation, ironically named AARC Holdings, which was easy enough for a master financier to conceal. When Linda stepped foot onto the mansion's wraparound terrace for the first time, her eyes glowed with triumph. Here she thought was her kingdom, a place where she could host her own glamorous parties, and maybe even re-envision her future beyond endless event planning. Arthur visited her there sporadically, each time feeling a mixture of pride and guilt. He found himself promising her the world, momentarily forgetting Catherine, who waited for him in their New York townhouse with a child growing inside her. Arthur's duplicity escalated. If Catherine called while he was at Linda's mansion, he would lie about being locked in a meeting. He kept separate phones, one for business, one for personal, and one for Linda. He rationalized to himself that his marriage could still remain intact if Catherine never found out. He convinced himself it was possible to manage both relationships. After all, he was Arthur Caldwell, the man who excelled at juggling countless business ventures. Why not relationships too? But secrets have a way of festering, and Linda's demands grew as her presence in Arthur's life solidified. She wanted more time, more involvement in his affairs, a formal introduction to certain high-net-worth friends. She dropped hints about traveling together, about needing him at her side when she inaugurated her mansion with an extravagant housewarming gala. Arthur, caught between the thrill of her attention and the realization that he was hurtling toward a catastrophic reveal, tried to placate her with promises and checks. He didn't yet realize that the real storm was brewing at home, where Catherine was about to drop a revelation that would make all his lavish gifts and clandestine escapades pale in comparison. News of a massive property purchase in Palm Beach under ARC Holdings piqued the interest of a junior journalist at a local paper. The journalist Mark Coleman specialized in real estate acquisitions and wrote a small column titled "New Houses, New Stories." He noticed that RC Holdings had been quietly buying luxurious properties over the past year, and his instincts told him there might be a bigger story behind this shell corporation. Digging a bit deeper, Mark traced some of the corporate paperwork to offices in New York, addresses linked to Caldwell Capital. Though not definitive proof, it was enough for Mark to suspect that Arthur Caldwell might be behind ARC Holdings. He pitched a piece to his editor: could billionaire Arthur Caldwell be snatching up prime Palm Beach real estate under pseudonym corporations? His editor, seeing a potential headline grabber, gave him the go-ahead. Around the same time, Catherine was busy at the hospital, finishing up her final weeks before maternity leave. She was in her second trimester, radiant, yet increasingly aware of Arthur's emotional distance. One afternoon, she sat at a nurse's station, leafing through magazines, searching for ways to distract herself between patient rounds. There, in a local Florida real estate magazine, she stumbled upon a photo of a magnificent Palm Beach mansion. The article praised the property newly sold to an unknown entity. Catherine felt a pang of longing. She and Arthur once dreamed of a vacation home, but he had never mentioned making a purchase. That evening, a wave of suspicion washed over her. While her pregnancy hormones had been fueling her anxieties, something about the hush-hush sale triggered her internal alarm. She considered how Arthur for weeks had been making quick trips to Florida for meetings. Suddenly, it felt glaringly obvious. Recalling her friend Evelyn's warnings about a mistress, Catherine's heart pounded. The pieces began aligning in a pattern too coherent to ignore. She confronted Arthur that night after he returned from yet another hastily arranged trip. She demanded to know if he'd bought a property in Palm Beach. Arthur, taken aback, stumbled through an explanation that Caldwell Capital had been exploring real estate investments for wealthy international clients. Sensing her unrelenting gaze, he rationalized further that any acquisitions linked to him or his firm were for portfolio diversification. Catherine didn't entirely buy the story, but she let it drop for the moment, exhausted by the emotional toll. Meanwhile, Linda reveled in her new domain. She hosted an exclusive preview party at the mansion, inviting affluent acquaintances from Miami and beyond. Arthur made a discreet appearance, slipping in through a side entrance so as not to attract too much attention. Linda glided around the marble floors in a shimmering gown, introducing Arthur as a close business associate. The guests, many of whom recognized him, whispered about their rumored affair. Linda's boldness ignited a fresh wave of rumors that spread beyond Florida social circles, creeping inevitably back toward Catherine's ear. Arthur's attempts to keep a low profile faltered. He found himself fielding calls from anxious Caldwell Capital board members who questioned whether his personal escapades could jeopardize the firm's reputation. He tried to placate them by insisting his private life was under control. The tension weighed heavily on him, straining even his once unshakable business acumen. As the mansion became the talk of the town, Mark Coleman's article finally hit online news outlets. Is billionaire Arthur Caldwell secretly scooping up Palm Beach real estate? The piece was speculative rather than accusatory, but it generated enough buzz that other journalists began sniffing around too. For the first time, Arthur found himself in a PR quagmire he couldn't easily sidestep. Catherine read the article with a trembling hand, her worst fears gaining confirmation. She confronted Arthur again, tears brimming in her eyes, rage fueling her words. She asked bluntly if he had another woman living in that mansion. Arthur cornered, spun lies about how the mansion was purely an investment property, not some lover's nest. He swore there was no other woman, that the rumors were the product of envious rivals determined to tarnish his name. Desperate to salvage his marriage, Arthur finally offered a compromise. He'd take Catherine to Palm Beach after the baby was born, show her the property, and prove it was nothing more than a portfolio asset. Catherine reluctantly agreed, though her trust in him had taken a critical blow. For her, the property had transformed into a symbol of deceit, one that haunted her dreams. Despite the tension, Catherine clung to the vision of their baby as a unifying force. She believed, or at least tried to, that once the child arrived, Arthur might abandon these clandestine pursuits. She argued to herself that men sometimes had midlife crises of sorts, and perhaps this was Arthur's. It didn't help that her parents and close friends kept urging her to be cautious, hinting that Arthur might be straying. Yet Catherine refused to heed their warnings, fully clinging stubbornly to the notion that love and their unborn child would eventually bring him home, body, heart, and soul. What Catherine didn't yet know was that Linda's ambitions were only growing. She had a mansion now, but she wanted more, a firmer commitment, a piece of Arthur's public life. And she was about to make a move that would tear Catherine's illusions apart once and for all. Late one summer evening, Linda sat on the edge of her king-sized bed in the Palm Beach mansion, her mind spinning. She held a faintly positive pregnancy test in her hand, though it felt surreal to her that she might be carrying Arthur Caldwell's child. A flurry of conflicting emotions swirled inside her fear-excitement calculation. Becoming pregnant by a wealthy married man was a high-stakes gamble. Her phone buzzed. It was Arthur texting to say he couldn't sneak away that night. Linda stared at the screen, debating whether to tell him now or wait. She decided to send him a cryptic text. "We need to talk, urgent." He didn't respond right away, and Linda's suspicion that he might be with Catherine stirred a venomous jealousy in her. She set the phone aside and paced the length of the bedroom, rehearsing how she'd reveal the news in a way that maximized her advantage. Arthur finally called around midnight. He sounded weary and distracted. Catherine was unwell with pregnancy-related fatigue, and he couldn't leave her side for the time being. Linda's lips tightened as she heard this. She was pregnant too, and Arthur was oblivious to her precarious situation. She told him bluntly, "I'm pregnant," and let the silence linger. Arthur stammered disbelief and panic colliding in his voice. He asked if she was sure. Linda told him she'd taken multiple tests and planned to see a private doctor in the morning to confirm. Arthur felt the floor drop out from under him. One child on the way with his wife, another child maybe on the way with his mistress. The perfect storm he thought he could dodge was now swirling around him, unstoppable. The next day, Arthur flew to Florida under the pretext of an emergency business issue. Linda had arranged for a private consultation at an upscale OB/GYN clinic. The atmosphere in the waiting room was tense, their conversation hushed. Arthur tried to calm his nerves by scrolling through emails on his phone, but every beep or buzz made him jump. Linda, for once, appeared anxious as well, her usual confident facade cracking under the significance of this situation. An ultrasound confirmed Linda was around 5 weeks pregnant. Arthur's heart pounded as he stared at the black and white image, a swirl of confusion overshadowing any sense of wonder. Linda watched him closely, gauging his reaction. She expected him to be relieved or even happy, but all she saw was dread etched on his face. That night at the mansion, they argued incessantly. Linda wanted financial assurances, maybe even a direct stake in Caldwell Capital. Arthur balked, reminding her he was already facing the biggest crisis of his personal life. She threatened to go public if he didn't secure her future. Meanwhile, Catherine grew restless back in New York. Arthur had promised to cut down on travel, yet here he was again, vanishing to Florida. She tried calling multiple times, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She left messages reminding him of a prenatal appointment they were supposed to attend together, only to receive a vague text, "Caught up in an emergency with the board. So sorry, we'll make it up to you." Suspicion pulsed stronger than ever. Catherine began investigating on her own, calling in discreet favors from acquaintances who had contacts in Florida. She discovered that Arthur was indeed in Palm Beach. At the same time, local gossip placed a lavish black SUV, one matching Arthur's known travel preferences, at Linda Rivera's mansion. Feeling her heartbreak and anger swell, Catherine confided in Evelyn Johnson once more. Evelyn, concerned for her friend's well-being, introduced her to Richard Winston, a private investigator known for his thorough but discreet methods. After a lengthy conversation, Catherine decided to hire him, wanting proof, before she confronted her husband again. Over the next several days, Richard Winston coordinated with Florida-based associates, staking out Linda's mansion, snapping pictures of Arthur entering and leaving at odd hours. The evidence was damning time-stamped photographs, glimpses of Arthur's face, even a shot of him driving away from the clinic with Linda seated next to him. With each photo, Richard sent Catherine her worst fears crystallized. Torn between heartbreak and fury, Catherine wrestled with how to confront Arthur. A part of her still clung to the hope that all this was a misunderstanding. But the rational side of her knew this was as real as it got. She was due for a prenatal appointment soon, and she decided if Arthur missed that appointment, it would be the final straw. Arthur returned to New York a few days later, weighed down by Linda's demands and the suffocating guilt he could no longer ignore. Catherine was distant and cold, though she tried to keep her emotions in check. She informed him of her next doctor's visit, urging him to attend. Arthur, embroiled in a separate crisis at Caldwell Capital due to a major investor pulling out, told her he'd do his best to make it. Predictably, the day came, and he was a no-show. That night, Catherine stood at the top of their grand staircase, her pregnancy visible through her loose-fitting dress, and met Arthur's eyes with a steely resolve he had never seen before. She silently handed him an envelope containing the photographs Richard Winston had compiled. Arthur thumbed through them, his face draining of color. Before he could utter an explanation, Catherine declared that she wasn't going to play the fool any longer. If he wanted to continue this charade, it was over between them. If he wanted to salvage their marriage, he had to end things with Linda immediately and come clean about everything. Arthur grasped for words, tears threatening to surface. He stammered apologies, swore it was a mistake, claimed he'd been trying to end it, but feared Linda's manipulative nature. Catherine shook her head, refusing to be placated by vague excuses. Finally, Arthur sank to his knees in front of her head, bowed like a man stripped of all defenses. He clutched her hands, murmuring that he loved her, that he wanted to be a better man for her and their unborn child. In a moment of vulnerability, Catherine took a deep breath, remembering the man she'd fallen in love with years ago, the earnest dreamer who wanted to use his wealth for good. She conceded that for the sake of their child, she would give him one more chance on the condition that he break all ties with Linda, transfer ownership of that mansion to someone else or sell it, and vow never to see her again. Arthur, feeling the magnitude of this lifeline, agreed to every point. He resolved to do it the next day, not realizing that fate had other more dramatic plans in store. The following morning, Arthur rose early and made phone calls to his legal team. He intended to start the process of disentangling himself from Archie Holdings, transferring or selling the Palm Beach mansion, and severing any business or personal ties that bound him to Linda Rivera. His attorneys, startled by the abrupt instructions, scrambled to draft the necessary paperwork. Meanwhile, Linda was in an entirely different headspace. Having argued with Arthur the night before, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She was fed up with Arthur's wavering and wanted leverage to ensure her future. She contacted a private lab that specialized in discreet paternity testing. All she needed was a sample from Arthur, and ironically, Arthur had left behind a few personal items in her mansion that might provide exactly that. She had her staff gather a toothbrush he had once used along with a shirt that he'd worn. Then, Linda sealed these items and sent them overnight to the lab. She intended to confirm that the baby she carried was indeed fathered by Arthur Caldwell, a trump card she could brandish if he tried to abandon her. However, the universe had a twist in store. That same day, Catherine went to her regular prenatal checkup. Because of concerns about certain genetic markers, her obstetrician recommended advanced screening. Catherine agreed, providing blood samples. While the primary intent was to monitor the baby's health, the test also yielded a partial DNA profile that, when combined with paternal genetic material, could confirm paternity. Catherine, driven by heartbreak and suspicion, decided to do something drastic. She asked her private investigator if it was possible to obtain any item of Arthur's that Linda might have. She wanted to compare the baby's genetic material with Arthur's using the same advanced screening method, ensuring there were no more secrets. Through a stroke of cunning, Richard Winston managed to get in touch with one of Linda's staffers, who was disgruntled about Linda's high-handed behavior. For a price, that staffer provided a used glass that Arthur had left at the mansion. Within days, both Linda and Catherine had unknowingly initiated separate DNA tests. Linda's motive was to fortify her hold on Arthur. Catherine's was to confirm the fatherhood of her own baby and see if Linda's unborn child was also Arthur's, should Linda later claim otherwise. During this tense period, Arthur tried repeatedly to contact Linda to end their relationship. Linda, furious at his sudden coldness, refused his calls. The standoff escalated. Linda threatened to go to the tabloids if he dared to break things off without compensating her. Arthur, in a panic, offered her money just to buy time. But Linda demanded more an official acknowledgement of her pregnancy or a significant financial stake in Caldwell Capital. Arthur couldn't comply without risking everything. 1 week later, Catherine received a phone call from the private clinic handling her advanced prenatal screening. They requested she come in person to discuss the results. Her heart dropped. She worried about her baby's health, but something about the receptionist's tone suggested there was more at stake. That same evening, Linda received her own phone call from the paternity lab. The technician congratulated her, confirming that the DNA samples matched the father of her unborn child was indeed the individual from the toothbrush and shirt, Arthur Caldwell. Linda smirked triumphantly, finalizing her plan to confront Arthur with irrefutable proof. The next day, Catherine arrived at the clinic. She was ushered into a small consultation room where a somber genetic counselor explained that the baby's health markers looked fine, but there was an unexpected discrepancy in the paternal markers. Catherine's eyes widened in confusion as the counselor gently explained, "Based on the sample we received, the genetic indicators do not align with Arthur Caldwell's DNA. He doesn't appear to be the baby's father." Catherine's world tilted. She stammered denials. She had never been unfaithful. Yet the lab results were incontrovertible. Catherine realized that either there had been a mix-up or Arthur's sample didn't actually belong to him. On a hunch, Catherine quickly deduced something was amiss with the sample Richard had procured from Linda's staffer. Perhaps Linda had swapped it or the staffer had lied. Either way, the test indicated that Catherine's unborn child was not Arthur's, setting off an avalanche of confusion and heartbreak. Stunned and distraught, Catherine returned home to find Arthur pacing the living room, a letter in his hand. It was from Linda. She had scheduled an impromptu visit, claiming she had proof of her pregnancy and that she intended to share everything with Catherine if Arthur wouldn't see her. Catherine, reeling from her own shocking news, demanded that Arthur sit down. She told him about the DNA results, how they implied he wasn't the father of her child. Arthur, baffled, insisted there must be a mistake. He had never doubted Catherine's faithfulness, and she assured him she'd never been with anyone else. Right then, as if orchestrated by fate, Linda arrived in the foyer unannounced. Arthur and Catherine confronted her, demanding answers. Linda looked from Catherine's tear-streaked face to Arthur's grim expression, unsure what had transpired. Arthur barked that Catherine's test claimed he wasn't the father of her child and demanded to know if Linda had tampered with anything. Linda, initially perplexed, quickly realized the potential chaos this could cause. Sensing an opportunity, Linda presented her own DNA test, confirming Arthur was the father of her baby. Catherine's eyes flicked to the document, her heartbreak intensifying. The tension peaked, with Catherine accusing Linda of sabotage, while Linda sneered that Catherine was simply in denial. Arthur stood in the crossfire, speechless. In a fit of desperation, Catherine pulled out her own test results, slamming them on the table. She declared that there had to be a mistake or foul play. Each woman lashed out at the other, the heated exchange echoing off the lavish marble floors. Arthur, regaining some composure, insisted they redo the tests under controlled conditions with none of Linda's manipulations and no questionable staffers involved. Catherine agreed, tears spilling down her cheeks, and Linda shrugged, confident that her test results would hold up. Before storming out, Linda revealed that she expected Arthur to publicly acknowledge her pregnancy or face the media storm she'd unleash. Catherine, trembling with anger, locked herself in the bedroom, refusing to speak to Arthur. He stood alone in the hallway, holding Linda's DNA confirmation, haunted by the fact that he might soon be the father of 2 children, and yet one test claimed that Catherine's baby wasn't his. Little did any of them realize that the final showdown was still to come, and it would deliver a twist that would shatter every notion they held about loyalty, truth, and family. Within days, Arthur, Catherine, and Linda arranged for a neutral lab to handle comprehensive tests under strict supervision. The lab collected blood samples directly from each of them. No third parties. No personal items that could be tampered with. Catherine sat rigidly in the waiting room while Linda eyed her with disdain, and Arthur struggled to keep composure as staff drew his blood. The waiting period for results was excruciating. Catherine stayed in her parents' home in Boston, overwhelmed by betrayal and confusion. She wasn't sure if her heartbreak centered on Arthur's infidelity, the swirling uncertainties of paternity, or both. She had a supportive circle, her parents, Evelyn Johnson, and a few close friends, yet nothing could ease the sense of impending doom that lurked in her thoughts. Arthur sank deeper into crisis mode. Linda's demands escalated. She wanted a formal press release confirming her pregnancy was fathered by Arthur Caldwell. She threatened to leak photos of them together if he didn't comply. Arthur's legal team advised him to stay silent until the lab results arrived, hoping to discredit Linda's claims if something turned in their favor. But Linda's confidence didn't waver. As the public eye inched closer to the scandal, thanks to Mark Coleman's persistent reporting, Arthur tried to contain the damage. Caldwell Capital shareholders grew uneasy, worrying about brand image. Some threatened to withdraw their investments if the situation spiraled further. Arthur scrambled to reassure them that everything would be handled quietly, that personal matters would not undermine the company. Finally, the test results came in. Arthur's attorney received a sealed envelope from the neutral lab. With Catherine by his side, her parents in the background, he opened it, his hands shaking. The document listed 2 sets of results, one for Catherine's baby and one for Linda's. Catherine's baby, 19.9%. Probability of paternity, Arthur Caldwell. Linda's baby, 0%. Probability of paternity, Arthur Caldwell. A stunned silence filled the room. Arthur read it twice, thrice, as if the letters might rearrange themselves. Catherine snatched the paper, scanning the lines with disbelieving eyes. The baby she carried was indeed Arthur's child, contrary to the earlier tampered test. But Linda's supposed unborn child by Arthur was categorically not his. At first, it made no sense. Linda had shown her own documents confirming Arthur was the father, but apparently Linda had stolen Arthur's items and perhaps combined them with another man's sample that had enough partial markers to mislead the less rigorous lab into concluding Arthur was the father. Or possibly, she bribed someone to manipulate the results. In any case, the neutral test was conclusive. Linda's child had no genetic link to Arthur. Catherine's relief fought with lingering resentment. Yes, Arthur was indeed the father of her child, but the betrayal of his affair remained. She felt vindicated by the test, furious at Linda's malicious games, and drained by the never-ending drama. Arthur, meanwhile, felt a bizarre mixture of relief and anger. He'd been manipulated into believing Linda's child was his, risking his marriage and the stability of his entire life. Over at the Palm Beach mansion, Linda was blindsided. She received the same official notice from the lab and immediately called Arthur, demanding an explanation. Arthur, fueled by rage, unleashed a torrent of accusations, calling her a fraud and a manipulator. He threatened legal action if she tried to extort him any further. Linda's composure cracked. She insisted her initial test had been accurate, but lacking credible evidence, she had no leg to stand on. Enraged at being cornered, Linda tried one last gambit. She leaked photos of her and Arthur to a local tabloid, claiming she was still pregnant with his child. Lab results be damned. The images splashed across gossip websites, accompanied by sensational headlines about the pregnant mistress in Palm Beach. Yet the media's fervor soon gave way to skepticism once they heard about the contradictory paternity test from a reputable lab. The story now labeled Linda as a potential con artist. Arthur's PR team seized the opportunity to pivot the narrative. They confirmed that Arthur and Catherine were expecting a child, acknowledged rumors of an affair without providing salacious details, and painted Linda as a manipulative figure. While the scandal hurt Arthur's squeaky clean philanthropic image, many in the business world admired how swiftly he isolated the threat and reaffirmed his commitment to his marriage. This didn't mean Catherine and Arthur's relationship automatically healed. Catherine was torn. The baby was undoubtedly his, but how could she trust him again? Arthur, desperate to make amends, offered to step down from day-to-day operations at Caldwell Capital, attend couples therapy, and devote himself to winning back her faith. For Catherine, it wasn't just about the affair. She also worried about how Arthur's insatiable appetite for more money, recognition, admiration might resurface down the line. Yet with a child on the way, Catherine resolved to try. She set firm boundaries, insisting Arthur be transparent about his whereabouts, who he met, and the steps he took to protect their family's privacy. They began therapy sessions with a renowned counselor who specialized in high-profile marriages. Little by little, they picked through the wreckage of lies, sorting what could be salvaged from what was irreparably destroyed. As for Linda, she was forced to sell the Palm Beach mansion. Under immense legal and financial pressure, she retreated to an undisclosed location. Rumors claimed she had left the country to avoid potential lawsuits for fraud and defamation. Some said she bore another man's child. Others claimed she terminated the pregnancy in secret, and still others believed she'd faked the entire thing for financial gain. No one could confirm her fate. In the end, the mansion stood as a stark symbol of the illusions Linda tried to weave, and the stark reality that even the wealthiest man could be undone by deception. Arthur and Catherine emerged from the scandal battered but wiser, with a renewed sense of what truly mattered: honesty, family, and the promise of a new life they would soon welcome into the world. Months passed, and in early spring, Catherine went into labor. Arthur was by her side, holding her hand through every contraction, tears in his eyes, as he witnessed the birth of their daughter, Lily Caldwell. In that hospital room, they experienced a moment of unfiltered purity. No paparazzi, no scandal, just the raw power of life beginning anew. For a while, the Caldwell household was steeped in the quiet joys of parenthood. 3 a.m. Feedings, lullabies sung off-key, the gentle warmth of a newborn snuggled in her mother's arms. Arthur took extended leave from Caldwell Capital, delegating tasks to trusted executives. The high-octane deals and globe-trotting that once defined him were replaced by diaper changes and reading Goodnight Moon. Therapy continued. Catherine and Arthur confronted the roots of their issues: his insatiable ambition, her willingness to overlook signs, and their mutual failure to communicate. The counselor guided them through exercises to rebuild trust, regular check-ins, financial transparency, and more quality time as a couple. Little by little, Catherine felt her resentment soften, replaced by cautious hope. In one session, Arthur opened up about his childhood, how the fear of losing everything he'd built had driven him to seek constant validation. Catherine acknowledged she had at times expected him to be the perfect philanthropist, without considering the stress he carried. They realized that forging a healthier relationship meant acknowledging each other's flaws and boundaries while committing to genuine, ongoing dialogue. Despite these positive strides, the legacy of Linda Rivera's betrayal and Arthur's infidelity cast a lingering shadow. Tabloids occasionally ran speculative pieces about Linda's whereabouts, fueling conspiracy theories that she might attempt a dramatic comeback. Random calls from unknown numbers plagued Catherine's phone, forcing them to change contact details and enforce stricter security measures. At Caldwell Capital, many employees whispered about the drama that had transpired, but also recognized that the company's future looked solid under its new leadership structure. Arthur's name eventually faded from daily headlines, replaced by coverage of economic shifts and new technology trends. Yet every so often a reporter would try to reignite the story, prompting Arthur's PR team to issue terse, no-comment statements. Catherine busied herself with preparing to resume her medical practice. She planned to open a specialized pediatric cardiology clinic in a disadvantaged neighborhood, a dream she had nurtured for years. Arthur, eager to support her philanthropic drive, offered to fund part of the clinic, but Catherine insisted it be done through a formal charitable foundation they would run together. She wanted no illusions, no secret accounts, no hidden agendas. Arthur agreed wholeheartedly. The day the Caldwell Clinic for Pediatric Heart Health finally opened was a bright milestone. It symbolized not only Catherine's professional passion, but also the new chapter of integrity they hoped to write together. Arthur stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, holding Lily in his arms, beaming with pride. Catherine gave a brief speech about how every child deserves the best care, how her mission was to mend both broken hearts and broken systems. She thanked her parents, her friends, the philanthropic community, and lastly she thanked Arthur for standing by her and their daughter through turbulent times. After the applause faded, and as staff and volunteers hustled to set up for the clinic's first day, Catherine and Arthur exchanged a quiet, meaningful glance. They both understood that while the healing had begun, the journey was ongoing. Their marriage remained fragile, and in many ways, they were starting from scratch, but they had found a sense of purpose beyond wealth, a motivation anchored in responsibility and love. As they left the ceremony, a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating them briefly in warmth. For Catherine, it felt like a sign, an acknowledgement, that while the storms of betrayal, deception, and scandal had battered them, they still stood. For Arthur, it was a reminder that true wealth didn't lie in the billions he managed, but in the life he had almost lost. And for their daughter Lily, it was simply the world she was entering, a complex tapestry of mistakes and redemptions where a mansion could be a palace of lies or a cradle for new beginnings. Standing at the threshold of the clinic, Catherine gripped Arthur's hand. They stepped forward, united in a fragile yet hopeful promise to be each other's anchor, to put family above deceit, and to forge a path where truth and love might finally eclipse the shadows of the past. In the end, Arthur Caldwell learned that no amount of money power or social standing can shield you from the fallout of broken trust. His mansion, once a symbol of wealth, became a painful emblem of betrayal. Yet beneath the ruins of lies, he found redemption in the unwavering love of Catherine and the new life they created together. Their journey showed that healing is possible, but demands unwavering honesty, self-reflection, and a willingness to rebuild from the ground up. Thank you for following this dramatic story of deception, heartbreak, and hard-won redemption. If you found yourself on the edge of your seat and want more tales that peel back the layers of human nature, be sure to like this video, share it with friends who love a gripping saga, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life-inspired drama. Stay tuned for our next story where hidden truths and unexpected twists await.